America. Good morning, Las Vegas, as that's where I live, in Las Vegas. So good morning, Las Vegas. And what are we talking about in 2021? Where is our voice in the oversight and the maintenance of effort and the outcomes of public services, as we are compulsory systems, and that means that we all pay for public services. And yet and still, some people would pretend that black people don't have the same opportunity or should not have the same opportunity as those who are engaged in the oversight process of the public American education system or the public system for taxation. I mean, we're talking about actually public services. We're talking about a nation that is, what were they saying, that a socialist nation, as America is, quite frankly, because all of the services come from public dollars. So that's what they mean by socialism. Well, what other system do we have in America? Well, because even under the taxation system, we provide dollars and funding for basically all services that are provided in America. So yes, we have a public education system. And yes, we are providing the dollars and the resources. And the state has an obligation, and so does the federal government. As it was the federal government that gave the rights to the states and ensured them that they would support them in the advocacy of the creation of American citizens. Let's not pretend that immigrants don't have the same opportunities in America as they do. All do have the same opportunities in America. Immigrant groups come here and they live everywhere. They are just in America. What does that look like? Immigration? Well, we've been talking about that for a long time because people have managed to come over the borders and participate in the process. But what is it when your voice is denied and drowned out of the maintenance of effort for public services, as in 2021? Where's the lane of participation? We can't pretend that blacks are not in America. So let's just not even go that route. And we cannot pretend that black people don't pay taxes. Let's not even go down that route, because let's understand that we have always had people like Michael Jackson and Lauryn Hill and B.B. King and Johnny Taylor and Bobby Blue Bland. And I mean, let's just understand when we're talking about the ownership and the monetization on the entertainment industry, because it's more than just sound and music. No, it's actually entertainment, because we have black people on sports leagues, and then, they're just performing. What happened? What is the difference between the gladiator days? I don't know. But in America, for people who have been denied the opportunity to share in the maintenance of effort, to benefit from the investment, and to be denied the opportunity to, just denied the opportunity to share. And that's real. Oh, I want this one. Okay, I don't know what that means. Okay. And so when we're talking about maintenance of effort, and when we're talking about public education, and when we're talking about freedom, it costs. So what was the cost of freedom for you? Just in understanding, you're American. You were born in America. What is your obligation to the system in America? And how do you engage in the process? But because we are who we are, blacks in America, Negroes, formerly enslaved, it really doesn't matter. The subgroup that we belong to has a powerful effect on the opportunity to benefit. Look, we got a new little red light over there on that tower. I don't know what that red light is, but it's there. That's new. But I just have to tell you that living in America, consequentially, black people have been forced to openly witness the degradation of their people, and they don't have the ability to share in the oversight process, as that's been continually managed by the system. And states have eliminated the opportunity for black people to engage in a process which would demonstrate that they had a conversation about the maintenance of effort and how well the state is performing. And there's nowhere that you can engage in that process. So my response to that is to each one reach one, teach one, that the responsibility of citizenship comes inherently from self. And that just means that if you as an individual see a problem and understand what that problem is, the responsibility to share in the concern of the maintenance of effort for the services that are not benefiting your community comes from you individually. Meaning that you have the power, just as we witness in this 2021 election, to bring about a change. And you don't have to wait for anybody to share with you how it's going to be done, because actually operation of public services comes from oversight management, comes from public investment. And where is the public investment from the people who look like me? Chocolate, color, And other voices are being heard in regards to immigrants and their services and the language development. That's a focus, because as an American, we want everyone to learn English. So ESL, English language learners, generate dollars from the federal coffers to ensure that transition happens. But for the at-risk children here in Vegas, they're somehow not included, not the black children. If you go back in the history of Las Vegas, I don't believe they're targeting how to lower the disproportionate number of children who are assigned to a placement of alternative placement. And when they say that they can expel a child from a gifted and, from a resource like their permanent school, well, that might be because that school, their right to attend that program might have been the magnet school. And when they kick you out, there ain't no getting back in. And here attempts to shore up the failures of public education in America. And that's what happens. As a nation, we need to understand the inability to progress, the inability to engage comes from the power of the state to ignore you as an individual. Group. You know what I'm saying? Because your group has never been invited to the table. Of course, I believe that at one time, when they wrote the Civil Rights Act in 1964 and all those other amendments, 68, 67, whatever, I believe that there were amendments to the Constitution or to the federal response to access. And those are laws. And understand me when I say the law is the law. And policies are implemented by the state in which to reach the understanding of the personal responsibility from the state to the federal government to create access for people who look like you. And I don't care what you look like, because even children with disabilities have the right to participate and engage and reach the promise of a fully included educational option, just as any other child that would be assigned to a gate institution. That means that we have to provide the same level of access for all children. That's just what we do in America, right? We don't set aside people and then say that they're only going to get access to this limited amount of public services. No, that's not how it works. But it works in the manner in which it works because people, my people, your voices have been drowned out. Across this nation, the accountability portion of the federal obligation for a free and appropriate public education comes from the federal government, who has failed in its responsibility because they have allowed states' rights to over and supersede the responsibility of the state and the obligation to the maintenance of effort. But let's not pretend that Nevada was recognized as one of those states that sent somebody over there to the Capitol for the insurgency. So don't be alarmed when you understand that blacks have not been successful here, because there's always been that level of hypocrisy. You know what I'm saying? Meaning that they have figured out ways that they didn't have to serve you. And because, you know, education is a modified behavior, you know, the state is really working with your community because it gave your people some grant money. But the grant money didn't supersede the responsibility of the state to educate. No, it didn't. It just was supposed to equalize the ability of the African American community to work within its community and to provide support, but it's nearly not enough, simply because the denial to have a conversation in regards to the maintenance of effort for all your people, well, you've just been denied the opportunity to participate in that. And then they put a few black elected in positions and inform them that they do not speak for the black nation. No, they don't. People who are elected on the dais, on the other side, sitting up there in the rule-making process, well, they represent the office that they were elected to represent, not black people. And I don't care if they're Asian, black, or any other culturally person that comes to America, because actually we just have someone probably from every nation on the earth living in America. And they all share the same rights as you as an African American. But they have more rights than you, because legally the obligation to ensure that they transition to become real Americans comes from, you know, the state, or the allowances aligned to ensure that, you know, we're not denying access to anyone. But to be black in America in 2021, to understand the process of oversight and engagement, and to be totally ignored, but to look at the outcomes of the maintenance of effort and to see that black people are being denied reasonable opportunity to engage in the process, well, it's troubling. It's more than troubling. It's just insanity. And, you know, don't ask what insanity looks like, because it looks like we're doing the same thing continually and expecting a change. So don't think that you have to align yourself with any organization, as citizenship requires that you, my friend, look in the mirror and say, this too is my obligation. So call your governor, because it is the governor's responsibility to ensure that access happens. I did not say call your local city council people. No, I didn't say that. I did not say call your Department of Education. No, I did not say that either, because simply when it comes to engagement, they have just totally ignored the fact that you, my friend, are a citizen too. And so I need more individual citizens, you know, those ordinary Americans, you know, just Americans, to concern themselves with the lack of the maintenance of effort, and to see those failures of the people who don't have the ability to sustain a place of rest for their families, you know, and who are living in cars right about now. And I can tell you that a lot of Americans understand just what it feels like to be black today, because the inability to control the resources that are coming into your household is what it feels like to be an African American, because you're always wondering if you're going to be allowed to participate. Let's not pretend that we did not witness the public persecution of Kaepernick. Because Kaepernick said, how do you expect me to play ball when I might fear that another young black person would be murdered openly in the public sphere, and nothing happened? He took a stance to this. He wanted to recognize that African Americans were being disempowered as they were being denied the ability to concern themselves about the maintenance of effort for public people who are providing those public services that we are paying for. The American taxation system exists, and we all pay. We all pay. to ensure that access happens for Americans. But somehow, in the lost translation of 2021, Black Americans are still being prohibited and prevented from exercising their duly responsibility to engage and share in the conversation, which brings us to understanding the level of democracy that must be maintained to establish and to ensure that our republic survives. And because the republic is at risk now of being jeopardized because of people who work within states to undermine the responsibility of the offer of a free and appropriate public education that would sustain lifestyles and sustainability for people who are citizens to engage in the oversight process, because there is no chosen group. There is just no chosen group that would sustain the services to ensure the accessibility happens for their people, as each and every one of us share in that burden, the burden of oversight. But if you're a taxpayer, and just like I said, if you're a taxpayer and you ain't never, just voted, how does that feel? I would like to have an understanding of what it feels like to be my president, because he admitted that this is the first year he ever voted. And what does that feel like to be a first generation American? Well, he was an American and he's a Black American. And this is the first time he voted in a general election. Well, that means that's just the first time he voted, but he didn't vote because he couldn't. Because he didn't want to. He didn't vote because he had a felony. And a lot of our people have felonies. So when we're talking about still accessing resources that are aligned to maintain the outcomes of the public, well, what are we talking about? My, we're just talking about this is America, and this is what America looks like. We are all responsible for the maintenance of effort for the services that are provided in our local communities. And we all share in the responsibility to share a concern when we see that the system is broken. But for the system in which policies are aligned to preclude, meaning prevent and eliminate your engagement in the outset of outcomes for the federal investment in public education and public services, and the ability to access contracts and engage in the livelihood of living an American and being an American. Because we have to understand that we too pay money for small businesses to help support nonprofits. We're all in this boat together. Yet and still, some people would like to keep us as just the harvest with no rights and no obligation of responsibility for the outcomes or the maintenance of service or effort. So in America, individually, you are so powerful. As individually, in your little one body, in your one little mind, you have the ability to pick up a phone or pick up a pen or a pencil and write to your governor, the state elected official that would engage in the onsite of the maintenance and the conversation, so he can create the obligation for a state level commission or group of public citizens, not chosen public citizens. No, we're not looking for the chosen few. As if the chosen few had the ability to make a change, well, we wouldn't be in this position. We want American citizens to call individually and share concern with the failed services of the maintenance of effort for the public institution that would create opportunities for all people, but have been utilized to oppress and to keep out and to sustain the functional services or the functionality of what has always been the entitlement of oversight, the entitlement of maintenance, the entitlement of outcomes, whatever you'd like to call it. I really don't care. Because some things in this lifetime, if you choose not to step up, are just not evaluated or assessed. But when you live in a nation that is run under the republic, because, a lot of states, you need to understand, fly under the Republic of Nevada, under the Republic of California. That means that we're just joining in the United States of America, unitedly. But when we talk about where is the conversation in 2021 about the offer of a free and appropriate public education that comes from the, Emancipation Proclamation, which included us as we were excluded formerly, but now we're included in America. And it's wonderful to understand that the power comes from you, as you individually can make a change, as we all witness from Stacey Abrams in Georgia, as Georgia has been holding it down for the Republican Party, which represents, what do they represent? Come on, help me. The word is rural areas, and empowers and embolden rural areas to have the same representation as urban areas. And lots of people live in urban cities, larger cities, that still generate the same or more dollars because they have more people to provide services for. But the obligation to still provide the same level of service still comes from America. So we still look at our rural areas and try to figure out a dollar amount to sustain those few people in the rural areas. But when we start looking at the obligation to a free and appropriate public education and the maintenance of effort and whose voices would be considered in that maintenance, understand that our voices have been drowned out as they are trying to establish that we just didn't want to do it. And how comfortable are people when they sit around a table in the engagement of the IEP and try to align that your child just got all Fs, just didn't try. But when you ask them what would have changed the circumstances for that child that was failing, and when did they understand that child was getting, overburdened with the amount of work? Because usually what we're only talking about is transition from grade level to grade level. But if your child never got beyond the 3rd grade, what does that look like in the 8th grade? Because they're still at 3rd grade level. And because districts have continually to rely on the ability to document a child as being below basic and then somehow just refusing to participate. You know what I'm saying? Somehow, if you can't read in the 8th grade or the 9th grade, it becomes your personal responsibility if you can't complete your assignments. So wherever they let you off and start marking your permanent papers that you were below grade level, that's where you were not allowed to continue. That's where you stopped in your educational premise. And so I don't care, if you do graduate and they give you a certificate that says you completed the offer of the 12 years. That's all it says. It doesn't say that you graduated with the ability to transition to a university or you graduate with the ability to transition into a junior college. No, because if you are not at grade level, when they give you your exit papers, what happens is truly when you get to the next stop, well, they start you all over again. So you could be getting there, and the junior college is saying remedial education is what this child needs, and this is how long it's going to take you to catch up. And there ain't no catch up. in American education system. No, there's just access. And when you're accessing it, and if you're benefiting, well, it just continues, because the maintenance of effort is measured by the person who's receiving the services. But if they have drowned your voice out and told you that your child just didn't make it because they didn't complete their assignments, do you think that someone can fail your child because they didn't complete an assignment, but they never showed you or demonstrated to you individually that your child could even complete the work? Because that's the obligation of the federal, you know what I'm saying? Opportunity for the faith. That's why we pay the money. That's why everybody pays taxes. And in this system, under the American taxation system, where we are not being allowed to voice our concerns for the failed services that are being applied in our local communities. And I would ask you, my friends, what does that look like? Because what that looks like to me is continued oppression in America. And what does oppression look like? Well, oppression looks like in America, oppression looks just like the plantation. And if you've never been on the plantation, understand that on the plantation they had ways of minimizing or redirecting people by punishing them, you know what I'm saying? And that's why looking back in history, being a black American is a frightening thing. I wouldn't be here, honestly, or maybe this is my soul reincarnated, I don't know. But the real deal is this is unacceptable. In 2021, all children have a right to a free and appropriate educational option, and the responsibility for the maintenance of that lies on the state. Access lies on the state. So I got to tell you, if your child is failing the letter grade of F, and somebody gave you an F, and hey, we're still promoted. How did that feel? Because every year you get promoted and you still can't do the work. How does that feel? And so pretty soon, this behavior thing that they have going, where they have shoved all the children who have just failed to transition to the next step. That's just real. This is where we are in 2021. And it says I don't have any viewers. Isn't that amazing? And so, anyways, in America, as an American, your responsibility individually is to you individually. Step your game up. Share your voice, as you cannot wait to join an organization that would represent you. Because if they could represent you, we would hear the representation. We would be able to join in the concern of failed services. But when you can't find the conversation about the maintenance of efforts and the outcomes that should be happening for the people who look like you, well, it ain't happening. And that's just real. So we hit bits and pieces and fragments of what's happening in public education for African American children here in Las Vegas, and understand that Clark County is the 5th largest school district in the nation. I did not say in the state, I said in the nation. So the services and the outcomes and the maintenance of effort and what they do to ensure that access is happening for all children is demonstrated by the local people. But when the local people decide that your voice is irrelevant and work hard to demonstrate that they are doing something, but quite frankly, you cannot see the actions because your voice is limited. And no, it's not acceptable that you would not have a voice to bring about the change that needs to happen for inclusive practices in America. Because failure is just never an option in public education. It amazes me how many people just absolutely accept the letter grade of F and keep it moving. Because F means that somehow your child just didn't make it. And then when they start saying that they're failing every class, well, what do? For black people, when they come, usually they are confronted by people who are I just can't, I can't work with that child anymore. See, it happens. It's not a joke, but it happens. But when people have the power to eliminate your right to your offer of free and what would be appropriate publication, and then remand you down to the least option of the state's involvement in the maintenance of effort for people who look like you, and there's a whole lot of y'all in the behavior maintenance programs. And understand there's no requirement for people to have certain credentials when they're working with your children. So they just hook a brother up. Okay, it's all good. But in America, when you're on the hookup side, you ain't getting your opportunity, and that's just real. How sad, how unfortunate that we live in 2021. And the organizations that would represent the lack of inclusive practices represent people who represent themselves, and they love photo ops. So don't worry. If you cannot see or understand or feel where change is happening for your people like you, it ain't happening. So apparently the conversation is struggling to happen in America as we have the Black Caucus and we have elected people from all over the United States of America to have a conversation in which which was open to the public. And if you knew how to get in there, you could share your concerns. And life is about sharing your actual concerns about the lack of maintenance or the oversight process or whatever when it comes to providing public services, as we all participate in the investment of the public option. And that's just real. I mean, so real. It's real. So we have to pay taxes, and the outcomes in the maintenance, we're being denied the opportunity to share concerns about failed services, and people are being entitled to work with our children without being required to maintain a level of services, which in turn is providing no support and no transitional support for people who look like us. So when you made the wrong choice, I mean, really, choice is everything. But if you choose to, because you're hungry and you see something, and in that moment you thought about it, just like that, like that Marjorie Greene or whatever her name was, whatever, the Republican senator that was all caught up in, the excitement of Donald Trump and went against the American principles and the values that she would need to have in order to provide equal representation for all people. And then she didn't want to be punished. Well, how do you feel having someone who is so limited? And then to have the Republican Party talk about the blue state takeover. Okay, well, what happened to America? Because they only see it as a blue and a red state, and they only see it as divisiveness and division, and that's how they see it. So people who see America as being divided, people who cannot work on the other side of the dais, well, we shouldn't, the one focus should be on the federal legislation and the outcomes and the maintenance of effort that would enable transition for all Americans to benefit and to participate, but yet and still, where's our America? Because we only live in one America, under one nation, under one flag. And in the event that we don't understand in 2021 the importance and the power of being heard brings about the transition in the steps that are aligned that would create an opportunity for you individually. Individually, we have the obligation to just wake up and smell the coffee. It's itching my head. So anyways, if you can't smell the coffee, if you personally, individually, cannot share a concern about the on-site and the failure and the people who are working in your community, because people have jobs, real jobs. I mean, we're paying real salaries, just like we, the black people in America who pay taxes for the murderer of George Floyd, and what his principles are and how he performs his job would be the oversight process that we're looking for. But if Congress and the American Congress can continue to ignore the black Americans the taxation system is just not working for you as a black American. Yet and still, you would be imprisoned in a nation if you failed to pay your level of taxes, especially if you one of the gifted folks like Lauryn Hill, who had to do some jail time behind her failure to file taxes. Come on now. Somebody help me with this. As an American citizen in 2021, do you have the obligation to share a concern when you see that people who look like you have been denied access? Yes, you do. The obligation is not to align yourself with any organization, but really to understand the power in the vote, the power in the voice of sharing a concern. And yes, usually it comes from more strength of organizing, but for whatever reason, blacks have no ability to organize because you can't find, it's not like you can dial in and just say, okay, this is what happens with my people, and you know, because this is America, and we serve, and we're there, we've arrived. I mean, we are everywhere in America. And so, and just maybe not in every town in America. Every town in America might not have black people, but we're here. And this is what life's about. I smell cigarette smoke. I don't smoke anymore, but I can certainly smell it whenever I smell it. Anyways, I'm just trying to share the moment of the revolution will not be televised, right? Because in 2021, the revolution is you. The awakening is you. And your ability to engage out there in what you feel is a representation of your investment as an American taxpayer, well, that's you. Because we all pay some semblance, some form, something of taxation in America. And, you know, the a la peanut butter sandwiches comes from services that are applied to the people who look like you and who gets the awarded contract and who gets to provide those services. But for the oversight process, if you're denied and still being forced to provide those level of services for the maintenance of effort, for services that are applied in your community, yet and still denied the opportunity to share in the maintenance and the value to your people. And it's just like they're stuffing it down your throat. They don't care because they've always denied blacks in America the opportunity to share in the onset of oversight and distribution of services in every community. And so they're not letting you provide service. Oh yeah, you get to provide services in their community. Let a black doctor become real and see how many black people can be his patients, because you ain't gonna get in the door. Because black people have to be 10 times better in whatever they do. Excellence is required. And so because you're not even going to get from the bottom to the top unless you're not at the top of your game. But when it comes to regular services, regular educational outcomes, where's the maintenance of effort? Because it doesn't exist when it comes to people who are black, because we are denied nationwide the conversation of what's working and what's not. And I'm telling you, it's a local issue, because failure is just never an option. I can tell you, none of my children ever received a letter grade of F, and if they did, I was right there the next day. We had to talk about that F, and we had to talk about what he was supposed to learn and what he didn't get, and that is the responsibility of a parent. But if you're letting your kid get letter grades of F based on their behavior, all right, let's talk about some of those behaviors. Because if kids don't understand what they should be doing, they can't do the work. But when the class is moving so quickly and there's been no analysis of your child to participate, but you allowed them to provide your children with documentation of below basic and far below basic, well, that's just a letter grade of F. Let's not pretend your child is failing to thrive. And once your child is not thriving in the public education system, well, everybody else is just, nobody wants to accept that. Okay? So if they let your child slide at any one time, I don't know when they got off task, but if they're getting F's, then they're not learning. And that's just that's an admission to the guilt of what we have allowed to happen to our people in America. So pimping ain't easy, but damn, come on now. We all have to recognize the minimal obligation that if you're a taxpayer, there is an obligation to oversee the maintenance of effort of the investment for the public services, for the people who look like you. Where's your voice? But if it doesn't exist, and consistently you get the door slammed in your face when you're trying to work in your community or when you're trying to share a concept idea, and you're asking, what's happening? Why are these children not making it? And then people act like they ain't got to say shit to you. And guess what? In America, they don't have to say nothing. But guess what? You don't have to stop talking either. So the obligation is to continue to share the concern, because fraud is real. And I believe it is fraud when they supplement, you know what I'm saying? They supplement they supplant. See, supplement means to help bring about additional services to the children in your community, but to supplant dollars and to willfully, woefully admit that you supplanted the money, but then ask for a waiver. What the hell is a waiver? Obama said that waivers ended, and that was way back in 2018, I believe. It was before Trump got in office, and nobody got a waiver in education, because special education, there were no waivers issued in special ed. So don't ask to extend something that never even pertain to you. If you don't understand, that's just how you've been getting along. That's just how it worked for you for so long. Because, under states' rights, hey, it's whatever a state's willing to do. So if the people in the state were not ensuring access happened for the people who look like you, and it's always been a struggle, and your voice has never really been heard, well, then you understand that group-wise, you're ineffective. But individually, we all can get ahead. I mean, as we watch Stacey Abrams get on the ground and put her boots on the ground and talk to people about the importance of sharing their concepts and their understanding and the inability or ability to access or benefit from the services that we pay for under this socialist society. Because we are nothing but a society of human capital. And I guess that's where they get the concept of socialism. I don't know. They want somebody. I can talk about a lot of things, but I cannot talk about socialism as I never ever witnessed it. But if it is what America stands for, bing, 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 it's human capital, well, then that's what it is. But in this issuance of human capital and allowing people to come up on the backs of other people, and understanding who we have been in America forever, and understanding that we allow people to come onto our shores every day. Different nations send their people here. Yet and still, the denial of services for people who look like us is just real. And so maintaining the outcomes has to do with the American taxation system. Some people pay more taxes. Some people pay no taxes, and some people figure out how to get around the taxation. But it doesn't matter, because when we issue out the money, it would go to, let's not pretend we didn't all witness what happened in Ferguson. But I want to tell you what was going on in Ferguson when America was paying attention to the young blacks on the street protesting. The city council was busy issuing out contracts to contractors who they chose for a number of years, far beyond far beyond their ability to govern. So, isn't that wild that they thought that they could protect the federal dollars and the investment in their local community by organizing and, by what they always do, protectionism. Because the voice comes from the people who are empowered to advocate for themselves. So let's just not the real deal. 2021 is here. And I was born in 1958, so I'm sure that, the struggle has been real my whole life. I've witnessed too many public executions, like George Floyd and Ahmaud Arbery and Philando Castile. How frightening. How is it that I'm forced to understand that my people are still murdered? in the public, like the public hangings. Yet and still Congress was refusing to acknowledge that they had the responsibility to oversee the maintenance of effort for the very services we're forced to pay for. Taxation, the American taxation system, it didn't end, it's never ended. It's a never ending, I mean, how could it? Because this is America. So, but in America, the most important concept is that we, the people, and we, the people, need to understand that emboldening oneself and deciding that, hey, I'm a taxpayer. And if you're paying $20,000 and $30,000 in taxes, or even if you're paying $10,000 and $1,000 in taxes, I don't care what penny you pay, because we all have to pay. And in paying, our voices must be maintained and overseen, and that's just real. So how are you engaging in the maintenance of effort for the services for the people who look like you? Because most likely you haven't figured it out yet. And if you haven't figured it out yet, I'm here to tell you that it's critical. It's critical that in 2021, because we had all witnessed the insurgency at the Capitol, because that was real, right? And to understand that when people came from Nevada all the way to D.C., the District of Columbia, to have a conversation about what? I'm trying to understand what were they really doing? Because we all need to understand what America is really about. It's about the land of let's just say, shall we say the Pledge of Allegiance again? So we can all refer to how we were indoctrinated in this process initially. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So where's the liberty and justice for your people in states that would ignore the maintenance of effort and the ability to provide equitable services for all people? Because it comes from all people. And where is all people when it comes to failed services? Because we're paying for public services, but if they can't describe how they protect your personal rights for your life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness under the United States Constitution, which we were included under the 13th and 14th and 15th Amendment, and let's not review our rights to share concerns, but let's step up our game. Let's not wait for an organization to represent, as they have not been able to will the power and the change of building capacity within the community. So the capacity has to be built individually. Do you believe? Would you believe that our kids are not making it? You should believe that, because when we witnessed the Black Lives Matter movement that erupted prior to COVID, our children were hurting. Yes, they were. And what we're talking about is the inability to effectively transition to a free and appropriate, because you got to understand, what we're really talking about here is contracts and contractors. And the American education system is all about, let's look around. For public education, we have to have buildings, of course, and we have to have land, of course, and we have to provide, the electrical and the AC and everything that it takes to build a public school. And then we have to provide all those additional services. But who gets to determine who will the oversight of the maintenance of effort, of the outcomes of all the investment, especially when it's not working for people who look like you? Is it a joke? It has become a joke, because, when they're talking about equity, they're talking about acceptance. When they're talking about reasonable accommodations, they're talking about, behavior maintenance, socially unacceptable, like a continued, just a problem. So, they just kind of like, behavior has been, is education. Period. Nothing else to say. Transitioning behavior means education. That's what it means. And so if you get the academic one, the one that's going to help you sustain your life, well, then you're okay. But if you're on the road to hell, meaning that someone just put you in a room and gave you a ditto and then expect you to do the ditto, and when you couldn't do the ditto, okay, well, they're not doing the work, so I can't help them. Okay, that's not education at all. No, that's not it. So we have a lot of people running around talking about, I can't get them engaged, I just can't make the, it's not my fault, they won't work. It's just not my fault. That's what that woman was saying, right? She didn't mean to say those things about Parkland, and she didn't mean to say those things about Black Lives Matter, and she just didn't mean to say those things. And her showing up with the AR-57, okay, that's where our nation is. Some people don't want to be held accountable. They don't want any regulations, and they just want to continue to do what it is they do. And please don't complain about us. Who's us? You ain't included. If you're not benefiting, then you're not a part of the people, and that's just real. America. What makes us Americans? I can just tell you that, hey, individually, we all hold a personal responsibility to ensure that the children who look like us are benefiting. How does that look in public education? Well, a lot of times when parents are engaged, when the community and the district has an obligation to help embolden and empower parents to help hold their local people accountable, because we're just talking about free money. But if everybody is working diligently to benefit themselves and with no requirements, and then blue ribbon committees and Title I blue ribbon schools and magnet schools and all these alternative wonderful programs are really happening. But then they're hurting and corralling a lot of kids and putting them in behavior programs with no obligation to instruct. But if your parents selected that and just signed the little paper and let them transfer you there and not demanded the full educational evaluation to determine what would prohibit you from engaging in the process in the first place, and they don't put you on a plan to get to from here to there, well, they're just harvesting, and that's just real. And it's the community's fault that the harvest continues, because all children's lives should matter, right? We shouldn't have 8-year-olds that would commit suicide, right? And we shouldn't have 10-year-olds that would be tased or pepper sprayed in the back of a police car. I mean, it just has to do with the level of support that's being provided to people who look like you. And a lot of times the police are involved in the instructional or the inability to transition kids from step to step, or you know what I'm saying, to make it. So what does that look like? Why does the police have such a large role in the oversight and the monitorization of services that are provided to children in public education? And if all children had the same opportunity, would we need the police? I don't think so. So the reality in America is the maintenance of effort comes from the people who look like you, because no one else can demand the change that needs to happen in America. And that's just real. I never know who is continuing to watch. I have a few people, Marlo and Jackie and Laquita and Donald, Holland, and me, of course. But if I could get everyone to make a phone call to the governor in regards to whatever state they live in, if black children are not being successful in their state, and quite frankly, you can see the homeless people, what color they are. I mean, why is it blacks are so impacted with the lack of access to the public services, as we are just a mere fraction of being inhabitants of America? But yet and still we are Americans. We are only Americans. We're not a black American. We're not a white American. There's no Asian Americans, Latino Americans, whatever. We're just Americans because we come from everywhere. But if you're born here and the people who look like you are struggling to access the benefit of the public services, then you also have a right to protest for those rights. But when they shut you out and ignore that the people who look like you are just being herded and harvested, well, that's not the America I know. So the voice of reason says that empowering many to share concerns individually can bring about the change, just like what happened in Georgia with Stacey Abrams. And I would encourage everyone who hears my podcast on Anchor, or I'm on YouTube, or here's me sharing the challenge of stepping up your game and contacting the leader of the state to engage in conversation. Please call and share your fears about the inability for Black people to have conversations and participate at the state level of the maintenance of outcomes. And, let's stop pretending that people can sit around the table. Sure, anybody can sit around the table, but shall they have a seat at the table to have a conversation? Perhaps not, if they cannot communicate effectively about the fears of 2021 and inability for my people to share concern in the maintenance of effort for the outcomes of public services that have been for their children. So I cannot tell you to go to any organization because I haven't seen a functioning organization in my lifetime. I've been in parts and involved and engaged in the process, and the only thing that seems to work, the only thing that really is functioning is the public education system as it is supposed to. So during the time that I chaired the Committee for District Advisory and Compensatory Education, well, the voices were critical, so I had the most people attending, the meetings. But where is the open meetings that happen to really talk about the things that are really happening in Las Vegas? Because you have to search so diligently to understand where this harbor comes from. And when they're getting ready to host another public meeting in regards to the harbor, and they've never shared the MOU or the data that would demonstrate that that process is really affecting Black people in a positive manner. I mean, the data means that you got so many kids that come through there, and you can analyze and determine how well they can effectively sustain themselves once they leave this program. Because if they don't get a high school diploma, and I didn't say a certificate, right? Because in Nevada, they have certificates. They have 5 different types, but only 1 or 2 types that actually lead you to independence. So 2 types that are going to take you to the university or take you to the junior college. Or, but they were supposed to develop and enhance the workforce investment under vocational rehabilitation with the ability to do what? Give more people opportunity. And guess what? They don't have any data from that. So, they really just, a la peanut butter sandwiches, is they reward organizations that try to keep keep the people down. I don't know. But it really doesn't matter, because individually they cannot take your power away. I'm going to need you to make that phone call. I'm going to need you to share a concern, because life cannot continue in the process in which we are on the road to failure. We're on the road to imprisonment, the prison nation, because we have far too many Blacks, and Obama witnessed it. He's the first Black president, but he went to the prison and penitentiary system, and he got to see what was going on with our people. And he says, no, you need to give these people a real opportunity. So under ESSA, people incarcerated in juvenile facilities had a right to vocational ed. But hey, who watched that happen? I didn't. You can't even find things that are happening. But then you find organizations that have been gifted money to provide services and hand out that free fish every day. So just keep coming for the free fish, I guess. America. This is America. And my podcast today is about each one, reach one, teach one. So please, if you are unhappy about the maintenance of effort or the lack of communication or the inability to exercise your right to participate as an American citizen, please, please, please call your governor, because Black people are still marginalized when it comes to being service providers or participating in the public process of ensuring the sustainable outcomes and maintenance of effort for the children who look like them. Because for whatever reason, social and emotional learning has been the only offer of public education, and measuring the benefit has become, irrelevant, because anybody who's gonna fail can just apply for this certificate of completion. And that's how they got around it. But guess what? Obama said, no, we're not even going to give you any waivers. Those people have to have an opportunity. Now, this is a conversation we need to have, because we can't have a conversation about what's working and what's not, because we can't seem to come together in any one fashion form. This is 2021. Where in the hell are the black community that would talk about the benefits or the outcome or the inability to have outcomes? Because I really don't care. The participation level as an American citizen comes from individuals. Please understand, in 2021, we have to wake the hell up. Please understand that freedom has never been free. Please understand the voice of reason is your voice. So if you don't think we need to have any changes, well, just keep on watching television, should I? Just television, keep on watching. But if you believe that accessibility and the ability to engage in the process and participate just like real human beings in 2021, because see, I feel that if I'm being denied, then people are treating me like I'm not a human being, as I can witness and see the inadequacy of public services and the inability for our children to have the same level of access at an early age so that we can really monitor the benefits. But under child fine, under the federal law, the obligation is on the state. But when the state doesn't even have the data about child fine and special education and how many kids and how the services are being provided and measuring the maintenance of effort, then what are you talking about? We're not talking about anything. But it happens that way. So until we increase the voices of concern, we cannot change. So in 2021, the revolution has not been televised, but please, please, please awaken. Watch my podcast. Listen to my podcast on Anchor. I'm on Facebook. I'm on YouTube. I'm just on Twitter. And, I've been doing this for a long time. And the real deal is that most people have not had the opportunity to engage in the process that I have, simply because I was a single parent raising 3 boys, and the ability to monitor and oversee their education and their educational outcomes is real, but I didn't accept letter grades of F. But a lot of black people continue to accept failed services, and that's just something that is not a conversation, because black people don't like to talk to black people about what's going on. It's like they've taken it personal. It's not a personal thing, no. But when we pay taxes, the obligation is to demand a level of accountability for the maintenance of effort, for the outcomes of public investment. This is Darlene Anderson. I'll say catch me on Anchor, YouTube, Facebook, whatever. Go back and look at some of my posts. I have a room called Public Education. Will it be prison or, whatever for my people? But we haven't answered that question yet. That's a challenge. Are we going to continue to allow them to incarcerate our people and continue to harvest? Because we are still on the plantation. So in 2021, I'll say, each one, reach one, teach one, and understand that we as American people have an obligation to stand up. Even understand the power that people understand about being an American immigrant, how they can still serve on committees and be elected to office. And as a regular American, a regular black American, where your voice has been limited across this nation with the inability and the states prohibiting. Now this is a state action to prohibit the organization and the conversation about the maintenance of effort for public outcomes for the people who look like you, because you're on the bottom. And people just really don't want to talk about the failed services, but I just beg to differ, because the responsibility for the community to have a conversation about failure comes from the community that it is failing. And in 2021, with the election and Stacey Abrams, Stacey just realized that, hey, all people, all Americans, we're Americans, and we have to have representation. So as an American, where is your obligation to share how well the services are being provided to people who look like you if you're a taxpayer. So you don't have to do a whole lot. But you do have to stand up. The obligation to ensure that America exists as a nation, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for who? Because justice has really never been the obligation of America to the black community. But in 2021, where we will allow and organize and begin to re-regulate the services for immigrants, well, we need to stand up, because prison is not where we want to ensure that our people are sustaining livelihood. We want to have the same opportunities to work in our communities and provide and measure the maintenance of benefit for people who look like us. And simply just having the inability to share the concern is frightening, because that says that as an American, you are without a voice. As an American, your rights to citizenship have been just ignored. And when you try to acknowledge that, hey, I'm a citizen, I pay taxes, why is it that I might not be able to share my concerns about failed services? Is because this system is trying to lock down on what has always been the entitlement of being a white American, as they were there first and demonstrated that the services, you can't say one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all, but there's no justice for the black people. As a black American, I have the same rights as a white American. And hey, I'm just an American. And when my father was in the military, I'm sure the expectation is he had the back of an American soldier. And it wasn't a white American, it wasn't a black American, it wasn't an Asian American, it wasn't any other kind of American. And not even an immigrant who would come here and be able to participate in the national services as immigrants. Come on now, help me with that. I mean, because when we need people on the battlefield, it doesn't matter as long as you're American. But somehow when you come to America and you come back home, and the benefits that you fought so diligently for, to hang on to ensure that access happens for all people, well, somehow the people who look like you are just denied. And no, it's just unacceptable. So in 2021, when you've been given the tools and the resources to share a concern, to share a concern about the lack of the maintenance and the outcomes and the failed services, as we all pay for federal government services, because the federal government supports and sustains states in providing services for their poor, their indigent, I can't even say the word this morning, it doesn't really matter, but disabled and, mentally retarded. And really, I mean, come on. We have people who receive services under the Department of Rehabilitation that are having full services and caregiving and all of that. And it's something that we just do as America, for some people who know how it works. But for people who don't know how it works, who have accepted the lower end of the offer of a free and appropriate public education, would be a modified behavior, which would just determine that someone was overseeing your behavior. And is that what you're looking for as a black American? No. No, because I know that our children are gifted just like any other. And there's nothing wrong with a black person, except for the lack of opportunity and the inability to participate in a system that once you get behind, there is no catch-up. So for people who thought that giving letter grades of F to children who are entitled to a free and appropriate public education, understand that, hey, this is a nation that's about to revamp the public education system, as the monitoring and the measurement of maintenance is what we all pay for, and that's what we all have to stand up and demand. So if people in your community are not being serviced, and you can see that as an individual, please contact your governor, because it's the governor, and it's the governor that represents the state, and he's the one that can create the options and monitor the services and ensure that access is happening for people like you, because local people can't turn it around, because people can't do what they don't know how to do. And that's just real. People can't even see what they don't see, and that's the obligation. Freedom has never been free, but unless you stand up and demand, change doesn't happen without a demand for change. So until I sign on again, this is Darlene Anderson. Y'all have a great day. It's almost time for me to get out and just, do my thing on the Saturday. So I might come back later, but please catch my show on Anchor. Please catch yourself up. Please look at the conversational titles that I might have felt like talking about that day. And I can have a lifetime of conversation as I have lived and participated and engaged in the process. And it's just been a wonderful thing to understand that truly, 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 no child has to fail at public education. But we have to understand that the maintenance that we're providing for these students, is it benefiting them? And will it create an opportunity to sustain oneself? And if it's not, then the public needs to share a concern, because we are paying people for the sustainable options that they provide to the people. The harvest, the investment, we're sowing those seeds, but what are we getting? If we ain't getting nothing, except for more of the same dysfunction, and then we want to talk about it, and then say like the kid didn't do the work. Oh no, that's unacceptable, because you can't tell me if the child even had access, because of the restrictive nature of grading a child below basic and transitioning them to the next grade level without the obligation for you to come in and do the work. Because pimping ain't easy, but damn, we're just doing it relatively easy in 2021. So, until I sign on again, this is Darlene Anderson saying, have a great day. Peace.